Going on, everyone? John Magix here. Hope you're all having yourselves a wonderful day. We're going to be continuing on with this red tape series. With the exploring series, we're going to SCP-001 Mamjul Korar Part 2. I guess we're getting into the story of the Davites and their creation mythos in this canon. So I guess we're going to see where this continues. I guess someone in present time with the Foundation going into this underwater city they found off the coast of the Indian subcontinent, and yeah, see what happens as we move forward. So links as always down below in the description to the playlist here without my commentary and reaction into the Exploring Series channel. So please do me a favor, if you would like to watch them, without my commentary and reaction, feel free to do so. As well as, be sure to check out the Exploring Series, check out his channel, all the content he's got up there. Definitely deserves some support. He makes a lot of great content for the SCP universe, Lord of the Rings, 40K, etc. Star Wars. So check out his stuff if you haven't already, and be sure to hit that sub button. If you'd like to join us when I'm doing these reactions live with my YouTube members, there's a join button underneath the video, as well as a link in the description to the member benefits and tiers that I offer. Been around the channel for a while, and so you want to take your support to the next level, check all that stuff out, see if you would have any interest. And yeah, if you like my video here with my commentary and reaction added to this, consider leaving a like and a sub. Helps me and the channel grow, and it lets me in the YouTube algorithm know that you enjoy these videos and you want to see more of this kind of content. So thank you guys for taking the time out to watch this video. Let's jump into it. Again, SCP-001 Mamjul Korar Part 2.
SCP-001 Mamjul Korar Part 2. Regardless of the canon, the Davite civilization and the Deva themselves are rarely presented in a flattering light. At worst, they represent one of the most dangerous threats to human existence, capable of rewriting history to ensure their supremacy.
I think the Cactus verse is the only canon I know of right now so far that I've gone through in the SCP universe where the Davites are somewhat of the good guys, right? Like, they were kind of the bad guys earlier on in that lore history because of their following of the Scarlet King, but then they rebelled against them and kind of banished him. And then kind of, I guess, weren't as hostile. At least that's what I remember from the Cactus verse, canon stuff. So
at best, notably in SCP-6140, they were a people merely made to seem savage by an outsider, although even then they still had the highest rates of slavery in the world before the slave revolt.
yeah.
In this canon, we so far don't know a great deal about the Davites, and neither does the Foundation. All they know for sure is they were a major part of the downfall of the Mechanite Empire, and since the Foundation has to deal with the Mechanite resurgence in the form of Robert Bumaro and the Church of the Broken God, they're willing to look to the Davites for some answers. Let's continue. We pick up as the Foundation is starting to send divers down to fully explore the sunken city of Mamjul. Over the course of a few weeks, the trained Coyote divers of MTF Gamma 6 performed 13 dives, typically led by Desai, and monitored by members of the research committee, as well as a member of MTF Alpha 1. We're given a transcript of the first dive, as the team exits the stump out into the city proper. One of the team comments on how this place gives them the creeps, but another says that these are just some old ruins,
I mean, I'm not a huge fan of the ocean in general. I don't necessarily have like a big fear of the ocean, but at the same time, it's definitely out of my obvious, normal comfort zone here. So the fact that we're under the water going into the depths of the ocean to explore an ancient city, known to be of Davite, make their home city potentially, and with what of them from what you learned from in Aman Ram from the Meccan story, I wouldn't really be too comfortable going down there either. I'm just
Anything
saying.
else would be crushed at this depth, and even sperm whales don't go this deep. For members of an organization
also
focused
terrifying.
on the anomalous world, that seems like a fairly short-sighted view. Command tells them to just scout out the buildings, the architecture near the citadel, and the interiors for anything of interest. They can split up to cover more ground, but they shouldn't stray too far from one another. They exit out onto the street and are all impressed at the size and architecture of the buildings surrounding them, some reaching up to 7 stories high. The avenue in front of them is littered with debris, including large amounts of bones. The team proceeds to split up, exploring the nearby portions of the city, and Desai proceeds to tell the others to turn off their lights for a second as he enters one of the buildings. They do so, and after several seconds, a soft greenish glow begins to form from the cracks and crevices of the buildings, caused
Yikes.
by some kind of moss. The surrounding area is illuminated in
Bioluminescent
a
moss.
pale, sickly
Fine.
green light. Khan 2 remarks that it's some kind of bioluminescent algae, but algae doesn't appear this deep, especially ones that need sunlight to glow.
Right.
They take some samples, as Desai
Obviously, some kind of Davite biomancy.
mentions how the buildings are familiar looking, comparing it to Angkor Wat in Cambodia, a gigantic Buddhist temple complex covered and layered in intricate carvings of myths and legends. He says that this place is drenched in religion, and you can feel it in every crevice. The team continues exploring, and all of the buildings are reminiscent of Cambodia and general Southeast Asian architecture, many of them resembling temples in structure and form. Unfortunately, all of the buildings they check out turn out to be empty, despite the fact that these should be the largest and most impressive buildings due to their proximity to the temple. Desai says that there's nothing here but dust and blood, seemingly referencing a tale focused on the Scarlet King. Later, on their 6th dive, the team travels as a group in a diamond formation, focusing on the layout of the city. They encounter several large pits in the place of buildings, carved with steps in the sides leading down, containing water significantly darker than their surroundings. Khan 2 says that it looks like a step well, a kind of ancient Indian reservoir consisting of a big pit in the ground that would collect rainwater. They take a sample of the dark water and continue on into the southern third of the city, floating over large pathways layered with bones. The team comments on the skeletons, both the number of them and their features, some of which are not human. Khan 4 floats down and picks up a skull, showing it to be far denser than its appearance would suggest, with the large cranium fanning out into 2 horn-like protrusions and a wide crest behind them. There are also 3 eye sockets spread horizontally. Khan 2 says that a lot of these look more like cattle than people, but even then, no cattle they've ever seen before.
Yeah.
Desai remarks that Amani Ram had huge streets because of all their mechs and technology, while Mamjul had huge streets probably because of the larger size of their people. They also comment on the undamaged nature of most of the skeletons, with no signs of breaking or trauma. Clearly, most of them didn't die in battle, but that's for the researchers to figure out.
Yeah, I mean, that could be something where, again, as I'd stated in the previous video, I had wondered if the sinking of the city was actually of the Davite doing itself to cut off access to their spiritual city in the stars, so to speak. So I wonder if this was some kind of like massive ritual suicide situation to purge their physical bodies so that they could astral, their astral selves, spiritual bodies, could go up to their city in the stars and live on there until they could, reconnect, until their civilization could be revived, It seems like, I don't know. I don't know if that is the case here. That's what I'm leaning toward. So it almost kind of seemed like, if that is the case, that each culture may have had some kind of almost backup plan for if their civilization were to be wiped out in some way, where it could potentially be revived. You know, the Meccans, when Amon Aram, had their golden throne with the knowledge of the Bamaros or Bamaris that could be downloaded, which potentially could be actually just Bamari's consciousness. And as you know, each child, he just kind of took over their body with his own consciousness. So that kind of a situation. And who knows where this is going to go, but we'll see.
On the 13th dive, the team focuses on more completely exploring the massive stump, the citadel. Desai mentions that he's still
Name's Commander Shepard, and this is my favorite tree in the Citadel.
hearing a noise and asks if someone's radio is on static. Command tells them to keep moving for now, but keep an eye on each other. The team, however, agrees with one another that there's likely nothing for them to find here, as they've been scouring the place for hours now. They were definitely right about it being a citadel, though, a cross between a fortress, a palace, and a temple. There's an extensive system of rooms, but since there's no furniture, there's no way for them to tell what they're intended for. They've taken samples of the plant life, but there's not much else they can do. Desai wants to check out the base.
Again, with the knowledge that I mean, I feel like that's a risk, right? From the knowledge of, from the stories, again, that you learned on Monoram of Davites and their biomancy stuff. Like messing with any kind of plant life is, kind of a risk.
Floor, though, and then they can leave. The team descends down the central passage to the ground floor, turning on their flood lamps to illuminate the space. It's dominated by two massive statues resting on a dais with an altar in the center. They resemble the two largest figures on the carvings outside, one male in a headdress and armor, and an androgynous spirit inlaid with red jewels. The two appear to be dancing, and in front of them, a throne sits almost 2 meters off the ground, carved from what appears to be a single root of the tree. Several other statues with cupped hands decorate the space. Desai points out the floor as well, showing it to contain a similarly intricate series of wood symbols and lettering, spreading out in concentric circles from the altar.
Definitely seems like some kind of ritual room.
He approaches the altar, into which is embedded a knife of some kind.
Yeah.
He pulls it from the wood, and it appears to be a ritual dagger, so they bag it. They then proceed to take some pictures of the area, but most of the carvings have been rubbed away by the water, and there's no other relics lying around, so they head back to the surface. All of the samples the divers recovered were analyzed on site in the following weeks by the various sub-teams and personnel of the research committee, under the direction of Dr. Galanis. However, the limited array of samples and general lack of historical material caused difficulty and a lack of actionable results. Galanis wrote a memo the following month on their personal thoughts on the research progress. It reads, "This hasn't quite worked out the way I'd hoped. I don't feel cheated or bitter. Nobody could have predicted stuff like this, that the city would be nigh empty, or that we'd be working from scraps. But it's still frustrating regardless. This was supposed to be my big break. I've enjoyed spending my time on the Lillehammer's crew, but I think everyone knew why I was there instead of climbing the ladder back at a real site."
I mean, I don't know, right? Like, the city's been underwater for at least a couple thousand years, right? At least 1,000, but I want to say at least a couple thousand. So, don't know really like how much you'd expect to really find intact, right? With sea life and all that kind of stuff down there, salt water breaking stuff down. I don't know.
Relegated to the dustbin of history for something I didn't even do. I mean, I'm not stupid. I get it. They can't know for certain I had nothing to do with what happened in a money ROM. But it's still unfair. And then, of all the ships in the world, I happen to be on the one that stumbles across Mamjul. It's gotta be fate, I tell myself, and promise that I'll do the best I can to show them all that I'm not Bumaro or Dr. Nussbaum. And now I have to go, tail between my legs, and tell the council that I don't have anything. Not even anything good, but nothing. Maybe they were right to keep me away from the real projects. I know it's not true, but goddamn if it doesn't feel like it right now. It just doesn't make sense, though. Nothing about this makes sense. A money ROM was a technological marvel. They were doing cold fusion in 1500 BCE.
Yeah.
The only thing remotely anomalous about the Davic Covenant so far is that the fact that they had strange plants. How was this war at all evenly matched? What did the Deva have that made the ancient Mechanites so terrified of them? What is Kurar? What the hell happened here? We might even be able to answer that if we had anything left of records, writings, materials, artifacts, relics, anything. But there's nothing. It's as if the Deva have been wiped from history. It's infuriating. The research teams are demoralized. The divers are sick of going down to root around in old ruins and find nothing. The fact that their every move is constantly watched by armed men doesn't exactly help. I've had people coming to me and AJ for weeks with complaints of the MTF guys making it impossible for them to get any work done. But there's not much I can do without them thinking I've gone native. It's funny how many of my problems lead back to Bumaro, despite never even meeting him. I don't know what to do. There's just so many questions that haven't been answered. All we know right now is a facsimile, a half-dreamt image of the Davic culture. A rich history of architecture, art, and dance that you can still see influences of in Indian and Cambodian culture. An almost religious reverence for nature, androgyny, and dreams. But also indications of cannibalism, ritual sacrifice, brutal slavery.
It definitely seems to be this kind of like duality nature to the Davites, the physical and the spiritual. Like you said, the positive cultural stuff that's been passed down, but then also the slavery, ritual sacrifices, stuff like that. There definitely seems to be this like dual nature, this light and dark aspect of the Davites.
And these are all just from what we've observed in the city. No one really knows anything about the Deva. If we just had some kind of guide. Try as I might not to, I keep returning to Bumaro and Nussbaum, what they would have done. Though they did it for an abominable purpose, they were the only ones in the situation I'm in now. They were blockaded in their research until they found the Preserver to help them understand. Conventional methods stopped working, so they looked for a guide and found one. Except there aren't any guides left here.
Yeah, I don't know what you're going to find down there as far as something like that.
Maybe I just need to broaden my horizons.
We're just not looking in the right way. I mean, they in the previous video they had mentioned, you know, whispers, etc. So, and again, in the previous video, it felt very reminiscent of like pattern screamer stuff from other SCP videos that, you know, gone through so far. So I wonder if that's part of the case, if there's going to be some kind of pattern screamer tie-in with the Davites, being they are kind of astral by nature. They had to make a pact with humanity to enter the kind of the physical realm, as opposed to what I know of pattern screamers before, where they try to kind of like subtly take over and force their way in. So I don't know, but I have a feeling this is foreshadowing that she's going to find that guide that, you know, they're looking for.
Afterwards, a meeting took place between Galanis and 051 using a lay space communicator. The communicator projects the two into an alternate location to have the conversation face to face, which is, in this case, an ancient desert city. Galanis quickly recognizes it as a money ROM.
Right.
And 051 says that the lay space is a strange thing, but to his understanding, the communicator sends an encrypted signal through the Earth's latent ley lines using magic, which tends to respond to the moods and minds of the users. Since a money ROM has been weighing on his mind quite heavily as of late, it chose this location.
Wouldn't that be the perfect tool to then, you know, hey, we're hearing them on a ROM. Let's find out what people are doing here, man. What's Bamari been up to? You know, why don't we do a little reconnaissance?
To which Galanis says that it doesn't help that Bumaro built this thing, correcting themselves to say Aram. 051 says that they can call him Bumaro, as he's no longer the man that they hired, as far as he's concerned, and maybe not a man at all. They last heard from him nearly 10 years ago now, but things went poorly, although he's not at liberty to divulge too many details. Galanis tells him it's worrying to imagine someone that unhinged running around with that kind of power, and that he's one of their biggest threats. But 051 disagrees. The Council all agrees that Bumaro is an existential danger to the Foundation, but he does not believe that Bumaro is insane or the biggest threat they face, only the most present one. Galanis asks him if he thinks he's doing all this for power, to which 051 sighs and asks how old Galanis thinks that he is. Galanis laughs and says that they don't really know, as it's kind of an open secret that the 05 members are long-lived, being around for pretty much as long as anyone can remember. Galanis knows that that wasn't really what he was asking, though, and says that he looks like a very good 80 or a really bad 60. 051 stops walking and looks upward, saying that he was born in a Roma camp in Wales in 1880.
Damn.
He was at Verdun, Gallipoli, and the Somme. He lived through the war to end all wars, and another after that.
That's quite the experience, right? Being born then and living through time like that and the various conflicts like he's talking about, World War I, World War II, and on, you know?
To mention the countless other conflicts scattered across Europe.
Yeah.
He witnessed their hidden underbelly, the occult wars with their carnage left unseen and
I wonder if this is going to get more into some of the information on the occult wars, right? I've mentioned this before in some previous videos that the occult wars has been talked about it's been referenced, I should say, in several videos, but nothing's ever really gotten into exactly what the occult wars are, who's involved, what sparked them, you know, etc. And to my understanding, there's not really necessarily kind of a like unified canon or story around the occult wars. They're kind of just referenced in various SCP articles. If that's incorrect and there is more of a kind of uh series, canon, story, whatever, whether it's, something someone's actually covered in video format, or if it's just, a written article on the wiki somewhere, please let me know and link me to it, because I would like to look through it, because the Occult Wars is, as I said, something that's been referenced a lot that I would be interested in learning more about.
Unknown by the world at large. Dying angels in no man's land, accursed weaponry, and soldiers roused from the dead. He saw Robert Bumaro in the last message he ever left for the Foundation, and his was not a face of Machiavellian scheming. His was a face that 051 is unfortunately familiar with seeing and wearing. A man terrified, able to see the world sliding into another occult war, powerless to stop it. The two continue walking, and 051 apologizes, saying that he prefers to keep his thoughts on the matter to himself. But he does think that Bumaro discovered something about the abominate, whatever it is, and it shook him to his core. He's seen too many men die not to say that, as a young man, if he had known what he knows now, he would have done anything to protect the ones he loves. He simply disagrees with Bumaro about the means, as the Foundation remains the best and only vanguard against such a threat. He is sure the threat is coming, however. Galanis swears and apologizes, saying that that's a lot to take in. 051 replies that this is why they've taken such a risk on this project and on Galanis, as whatever the secrets of the Deva are, they need them now more than ever. Galanis understands, but the pressure is worrying, as they're not the kind of person built for leadership, and can
Also, I mean, right, like, you're getting into a situation where you're starting to peek into Pandora's box, right? Like, you already brought back one ancient culture that was wiped out that is extremely advanced. You're talking about a culture that, again, as he stated, had cold fusion back, during dynastic ancient Egyptian times or whatever. So, like, talking about something that, who knows, and that might not even be the most advanced technology that they could be capable of. You know what I mean? So you've already reawoken one civilization like that. Now you're poking into stuff with the Davites to learn about them, and who knows if, that's going to lead to their reawakening, and then, of course, the Sarkics, etc. And again, I'm still very curious as to what exactly is the Abominant. This fourth creature, faction, individual, whatever. What it could be. I'm kind of leaning towards maybe the Fae. Maybe in this canon, the Fae were based, from Africa as opposed to the North American continent. If I remember correctly, it was either North or South America in the Cactus Verse. It was one of those two that the Fae and the Children of the Night were based out of. I want to say it was North America, but I could be wrong. So that's the only kind of other really major faction that I could think of, and the only reason why I could think of the Meccans would refer to them as the Abominant is just because of, like, the Meccans are all about technology and science, whereas the Fae can, like, literally manifest things into reality. And maybe the Meccans can see that as, like, an abomination, an affront to their god. So that's the only thing I can think of off the top of my head right now.
can't help but wonder if the Foundation is better off choosing someone else. 051 says that perhaps that might be true, but it doesn't really matter, as Galanis is the one they chose, for better or for worse. For what it's worth, he thinks that they're doing fine, although he can tell that there's some bad news. Galanis says that the project is stalled, for lack of a better word, and apologizes. 051 replies that Galanis doesn't have to apologize, as he likes them, and does not consider Galanis' worth contingent on the success or failure of this mission. Galanis is surprised by this, and thanks him, as 051 continues to say that they are both historians, and Galanis actually reminds him quite a lot of himself in younger years, before he saw all the horrid depravity the world has to offer. He tells Galanis not to lose their bright eyes of optimism, as they will need idealists in the Foundation in the times to come. When asking why the project is at a halt, Galanis says that they just don't have anything to work from, as there's almost no historical record, no analogous societies, no writings or sources. The most they've been able to do is work on analyzing the architecture and carvings throughout the city, but even that's limited because it's in far worse condition than a money ROM. 051 asks if they have any idea what or where Kurar is so far, because if they were sister cities, perhaps Kurar is better preserved and contains something that they can actually use. Unfortunately, they haven't found anything, and Galanis is honestly not even sure that it is a city at this point. The Davic Covenant were paradoxical, and the only thing they can do is analyze their murals, so that's what they've spent most of their time on. What they have is confusing though, as the Davites had an intense focus on the metaphysical and spiritual. Unsurprisingly, it seems like they were theocratic, given that the central citadel is both the temple and the palace, worshipping some entity or greater power called the Scarlet. 051 says that he's never heard of such a thing, and Galanis says that they first thought it would be a blood god, which...
Interesting. So, in the previous video, they'd mentioned 682 as a reference, right? 682 is around in this canon. 682 is, one of the offspring of the Scarlet King. I mean, in general. Maybe it's not in this canon. And that's what it's curious about, right? Like, they know about 682, but they don't know about the Scarlet/Scarlet King. So, I don't know. I just find that kind of interesting.
A lot of the research committee still thinks that it is, as they had a place for ritual human sacrifice, with altars and obsidian knives, and all kinds of carvings of people being split open to appease the Deva spirits.
I wonder if them finding and playing around with the city is going to kind of lead into that with the whole Seven Wives, stuff, and them having to create the Montauk protocol, to keep the Scarlet King at bay, etc. I wonder if them finding the city and potentially reviving the Davites in the city, if that's where it goes, is going to end up leading to that.
The depictions, however, are different than they've seen in other Asian and Mesoamerican societies. It's a joyful affair, and the sacrifices seem almost as pleased as the Deva are to welcome them. 05.
I mean, that kind of would make sense, right? In a culture that, like, when you think about it, if it's true that they have this other city in the stars and, like, they have this kind of pact with these spiritual entities, and these spiritual entities are kind of, probably telling them, whether it's true or not, that they have souls and they can come and join them once they shed their physical form, and that their sacrifices are, actually a gift. If that's what you're raised to believe, your entire life, then yeah, these things would be celebrated instead of looked at as an actual sacrifice, so.
1 says that it's hard.
It's kind of weird to think of, but I mean, like, what if their kind of major holiday, like Christmas or whatever, is something like that, where people get together in their homes and they have some kind of crazy, what we would think of as crazy, ritual sacrifice thing, and they sacrifice a member of their family, the eldest, or whoever gets chosen in some means, some way, but I mean, you think about that, like, culturally, if that's how they were raised to believe based on this pact, it could be very normal that they have holidays based on, something like that.
Hardly reasonable to think that all societies would view death as final, especially given the exposure to necromancy that the Aegean tablets suggest. Galanis isn't convinced, though, saying that the depictions of the Scarlet are softer, more magnanimously indifferent than vengeful and demanding. Their art is complex, gentle, and almost sensual. Their cities are magnificently constructed, but at the same time, they know from the Mechanites that they had a vast slave system enforced by magic, and that their anomalies were at least in part fueled by sacrifices. 051 asks if there's any indications as to what that magic was, but beyond it being something related to horticulture, there isn't. There's similarly a lack of indications about their history as a society, including what happened to land them 2 miles underwater. The team doesn't know what to do, and Galanis feels like they've failed. 051 says that they've done admirably, given the circumstances, but Galanis says that they've exhausted all of their conventional options.
There's only so much you can really do, and like they said, the city is buried under 2 miles of ocean. Has been down there for potentially thousands of years. Like some stuff would probably be preserved, but other stuff, sea life is going to get into, barnacles are going to be around, what I'm saying? Everything's going to be overgrown. And who knows though? Maybe some of the magic that, the Davites had could preserve some of the stuff. It doesn't seem to be the case though, but yeah, the major thing for me with this city is it buried because the Mechans buried it, or is it buried because the Davites did to cut off access to their astral city? That's the big question for me right now as far as this goes.
051 tells them to turn to the unconventional then, to which Galanis says that there is one idea, but it's kind of out there. 051 replies that he spent his 30s and 40s advising the various paranormal organizations in Europe on how to arm themselves using their country's horrible, forgotten monsters and mythologies, so out there doesn't begin to faze him. Galanis says that they're going to need someone transferred to the research project, someone who was involved in the original Amani Ram initiative. That individual is none other than SCP-1867, Lord Theodore Thomas Blackwood.
Blackwood. My man.
Galanis speaks with Blackwood, and Blackwood says that he's always had such pleasant interactions with the Parahistory Fellows, though he's admittedly not quite sure what that moniker means, as history is history. He mentions that there was a fair-haired woman from that department who used to interview him quite often, a Dr. Nussbaum, although Galanis just awkwardly says that she's no longer employed by the Foundation.
Rip.
She's kind of why Galanis wanted to speak with him today, though, as they've been going over some of the old files from her project and came across something that was written in one of Blackwood's adventure diaries that they were hoping he could shed a little light on. Blackwood replies that it's been many years since he wrote those, and he's practically a different man now, but he'll try to remember. Galanis
Wonder if at this point is when he's turned into a slug, a different man.
asks about a section of Diary 57, in which he mentions the expedition of an acquaintance of his into the Indian Ocean in search of undersea ruins. Upon the mention of the alias Captain Nemo, Blackwood remembers, although he says that calling Nemo an acquaintance of his is much like calling the Sicilian sea beast an acquaintance of the Tyrrhenian sailors, if you catch his meaning. Galanis doesn't, but senses that the two weren't fond of each other. Blackwood says that he had no quarrel with the man, and in fact he admired his can-do attitude and breadth of inventions to support his adventuring, having had the pleasure of witnessing his submarine, the Nautilus, surface once. It was a technological marvel, the likes of which the world may never see again, longer than many ships, and seemed natural, appearing as though carved from a single titanic block of jungle wood, but filled with engines, armor, and livery.
Interesting that it would seem to be made of wood, with the Davite tree, being messed up.
Galanis remarks that that's oddly familiar, and asks if he ever went inside. Unfortunately, he didn't, as Captain Nemo wouldn't allow it due to having a deep-seated resentment in his heart for all Englishmen. Blackwood has never been particularly attached to his homeland, finding more solace in darkest Peru than he does in Durham. But Nemo was of Indian descent, and held a chip on his shoulder over the Crown's dominion over his land.
Yeah, understandable.
He felt that every well-born individual who had benefited from the plundering of his homeland deserved nothing but scorn at the best. Blackwood was unable to go on Nemo's expedition, but he knew some of the individuals that did go along, and had heard that they had found something far south of India on the seabed. The specifics were murky at best, but through the grapevine, it was whispered to him that some of the many spiritually inclined men under Nemo's command had returned from the expedition shaken and disturbed. To a normal man, this might have meant nothing, but as Blackwood studied with the Castor Monastery on the slopes of Makalu, he knew that Nemo had them doing the art of projection. With intense practice, meditation, and no small amount of psychotropic assistance, it's possible to enter into a fugue state of sorts, during which the soul may depart the body and enter into the astral plane.
Wasn't there, I forget what story, I want to say maybe it was part of the Cactus verse, but there was another SCP story about a doctor doing something similar where he took some kind of psychedelics, was like guided through some door or something.
The Castor monks have spent centuries studying the existence of the astral plane and the vast mysteries it contains, and have ascertained that it is a manner of reality blanketing our own, invisible to the naked eye, but interweaving with all parts of daily life, and is inhabited by spirits. The nature of the astral plane is such that it is at once a reflection and a cause of our own material plane. Significant people, events, and even places can leave impacts and connections that persist long after the destruction of the physical form, such as the presence of poltergeists and jinns. Blackwood's theory is that since Nemo possessed no gift for the metaphysical arts, he attempted to use his crew to astral project and discover the secrets of the Atlanteans. His crew, however, being largely unrefined brutes, lacked the necessary finesse. Blackwood would have stepped in then, but only a month after he heard about this, he heard that a common vampire had been sighted east of the Ural Mountains for the first time in more than 3 centuries, and he couldn't miss out on the opportunity. Galanis bets that he would like to see the sunken city, and Blackwood responds that he certainly would, to see if the legends of monumental towers powered by light and glass and great sea beasts bound into service are true.
Be hard to pass up.
Galanis tells him that
it would be hard to pass up, but at the same time, man, again, like the idea of going that far down underwater in a submersible isn't a really comfortable idea for me, but
Foundation has an interest in Atlantis as well, although its proper name is Mamjul. They've located the ruins, but there isn't much to see, leading them to go over the records of the initial discovery of Amani Ram and notice the references to some kind of psychic detachment. If Blackwood is prepared to share his knowledge of astral projection, they could probably convince their superiors to allow him to be on the first team. Blackwood contemplates this for several seconds before saying that he shall assist them in their endeavor, and together they shall unlock the mysteries of Atlantis.
My man.
Blackwood was subsequently transported to the research ships, along with a number of supplies, equipment, and a detachment of personnel from the Psychotronics Division at Site-19. Over the following month, almost every member of the Mamjul Korar initiative was subjected to a gauntlet of tests to determine their psychic potential. Those with the highest scores and sufficiently high cognitohazard resistance values were inducted into a provisional applied task force, codenamed Dream Team. By mid-November, 9 members of the initiative had been inducted into the team, including Lieutenant Greaves, Operator Desai, and Dr. Galanis. Foundation research into extrasensory perception had exploded since 1944 with the founding of the Psychotronics Division, and provided several advances, such as low telepathy, scrying, and limited divination, though true astral projection remained out of reach. With the assistance of Blackwood's expertise on the matter, Psychotronics Division personnel were able to train members of Dream Team into being able to induce a fugue state that Blackwood affirmed would result in successful astral projection if performed under the influence of nestic drugs.
Gotcha.
Additionally, 051 requisitioned the LSAP Cadmus Aram Deep Brain Oniric Parietal Stimulation and Recording Array.
Sounds like you're getting into some like MK Ultra shit here, man, with, psychedelics and getting into fugue states to astral project and who knows what.
A one-of-a-kind prototype constructed by Dr. Hadley Cadmus and Dr. Robert Aram.
Yikes.
The device consists of 2 separate portions: a medical implant of several electrodes inserted into brain tissue, leading out to a wire through the nape of the neck, and a computerized system to which the wire would be connected.
Yikers, brother.
The implant would stimulate brain tissue to produce a heightened state of awareness during dreams, and the computer would record sensations and visuals to produce as text.
So it almost kind of try to put them in like a lucid dreaming state, is what it sounds like.
The text would require additional human processing, but the final product was a largely accurate transcription of what the subject says and does, including while dreaming. The device was tested and confirmed safe before being implanted into Greaves to serve as an indisputable, impartial record of what was discovered for Council records, in compliance with the 05 Edict. Following the operation and his 2-week recovery, Greaves returned in preparation for the first attempt at astrally projecting into Mamjul, performed on December 20th, 2002. For the first projection test, Blackwood and 4 members of Dream Team were selected.
Dream Team.
Galanis,
I get it.
Greaves, Desai, and operator Sarah Morello. All of the members were given medical and neurological workups before entering into a secure padded containment chamber aboard the Phantom.
I'm like about to get into it here now.
In restrained reclining medical chairs with various instruments attached to the sides, leading to displays of neurological activity, heart rate, and similar readouts. IVs of Class W Nestics were inserted into the arms of all personnel, aside from Blackwood, who instead had a small amount mixed into the bowl of seawater in which he was placed. The members were also given sedatives and muscle relaxants in order to begin the test. Blackwood begins by explaining the process they're going to be going through, and tells them to remember that excess stress will wake them from the state, which may prove to be a boon or a burden depending on what they encounter. They should begin by closing their eyes and relaxing, allowing their muscles to slacken, opening their mouths and allowing their lungs to loosen and breathe simply and naturally. They should consider their place in the universe, members of their various homelands and their governments, members of their families, members of the Foundation. They should then consider their physical place, floating aboard a great ship, leagues off the southern tip of India. At the same time, they are floating leagues above the ruins of an ancient civilization. Their position is relative, so they may change it as they please, and the world will change accordingly. The plane of our existence they see is simply one more axis of position, and it's alterable. There's no reason they should not be able to change it as easily as one can walk from one end of the ship to the other. They should imagine themselves doing so, leaving that which is physical behind and entering something purer. They should allow themselves to walk from the bow to the bridge, along the gunwales of the vessel. It's a familiar path, with the sea on their left and the metal of the ship on their right. Their bodies relax as they continue down the path, until finally arriving at the stern, and as far as they can see, there is only the ocean. Blackwood then tells them to open their eyes, and since we're only receiving Greaves' perspective, we see him open his eyes, revealing himself to be standing in an alien landscape. There is no clear sky or ground, but instead auroras of strobing lights fill the space above, with only darkness beyond them and occasional flashes of lightning. Greaves is standing on a patch of viridian grass, only a meter wide, and beyond the patch, dotted reddish-pink stars seem to stretch on forever downward into the abyss of the plain. Some kind of fog or mist also blankets the ground, rising up to his knees. He calls out and turns to see Galanis standing in a lab coat in the distance. Greaves takes an unsteady step forward, and he's instantly a meter away from Galanis, who reflexively steps back. Greaves says that hopefully they're on the astral plane now, but Galanis tells him to stop and listen. They hear a distant chanting for several seconds, accompanied by the pounding of war drums and a howling sound. The two turn, and in the distance lies some sort of stone structure, obscured by a vast collection of tall trees. Greaves remarks that the sound is remarkably similar to the whispering noise in Mamjul that he and Desai kept hearing.
Yep, doesn't surprise me.
Greaves wants to go check it out, but Galanis tells him to wait for a couple of minutes to see if the others show up. Unfortunately, after several minutes, no one else shows up.
Uh-oh.
Greaves says that with any luck, the others are already in the structure, so the two begin to make their way
Are
over
they?
there.
Or have they been taken?
Periodically, lightning flashes across the horizon, bathing everything in a sickly green glow. As they continue on, the chants and drum beats grow louder, more intense, and a chorus can be heard vocalizing along, in a language neither understand, but both feel. They continue to walk for what feels like hours, but the structure only grows slightly closer. They pause, as out of the fog and mist, Desai, Morello, and an unknown figure steps out. The figure is an older gentleman dressed in a waistcoat,
Blackwood,
trousers,
probably,
and boots with spats. A derby cap sits atop his brown-haired head, laden with a boyish grin despite his age. This would be Lord Blackwood, in his former human form rather than his current sea slug form. Blackwood welcomes them to the astral plane.
I don't know if there is or not. If there is, I would like to know. But as far as I know, there isn't really a tale of how Blackwood actually got turned into a sea slug. I would like to know that, if there is, such a story.
And warns them not to think themselves into the abyss, as that would be quite an ugly fate.
Maybe you shouldn't, like, it's one of those situations where it's like, hey, don't think about this, and they're immediately going to think about that. You know what I'm saying?
The team discusses continuing to head towards the stone structure, which appears to be a fortress or castle, although the trees look thick surrounding it. They continue on, eventually approaching the structure as they pass through a line of impossibly tall, broad-leafed jungle trees.
Hmm.
Vines hang from the canopy high above, and shrubbery layers the ground. The growth is
You know, it makes it like the way they're describing this, right? That there's this thick jungle. I wonder if part of the pact that the Scarlet made with the original human that found that red gem, you know, was also a means of connecting that astral realm to the physical. Because in the previous video and even in Amon Ram, they're, you know, talked a lot about the darkness of the jungle and these creatures just appearing out of the jungle and this and that. And now there's more jungle references here into the astral. So I wonder if there was some kind of situation where some of this astral stuff was merging into the physical realm as well. I don't know.
thick, but the trees and undergrowth seem to shift, making way for the group's march forward. Morello comments
Hmm.
that trees this tall don't exist on Earth, as these are at least 500 feet tall. The chanting and drumming and singing continues to grow in pitch and intensity as they approach. Blackwood remarks that he's never heard anything quite like this,
Yeah.
as it sounds primal. The group then suddenly breaks through the tree line, finding themselves face to face with a massive wall, constructed of massive blocks of stone carved into shape. On the battlements, unclear figures peer over, and the surface of the stone is alive with pulsating stars, moving
Hmm.
in tune with the song. A huge archway dominates, through which a great door is very slowly opening. The door eventually opens, and the group walks through, stepping on the dirt and soil that covers this portion of the plain. They find themselves in a massive, intact city, with temple-like buildings rising for stories in all directions. In the far distance, at the center of the city, and at the end of the long avenue on which they currently stand, the topmost portion of a huge tree can be seen, its branches spreading atop the sky. The chanting and drum beats are louder than ever, and in every direction there is bacchanalian celebration, as huge
Hmm.
figures fill the city shoulder to shoulder, engaged in revelry. The entities all vary in shape and appearance, but they're tall, in excess of 3 meters, with pale mint skin and long curling horns. They drink, dance in intricate patterns, and sing their chanting harmony in tune with the huge drums. However, they leave the main Broadway entirely empty for the group to walk through, while looking at
Interesting.
them. Desai remarks that the buildings look like the ones in Mamjul, but alive. And Galanis says that the Deva never died out, just the Covenant did.
Yeah.
The city resembles the architecture of Mamjul, but raised to an inhuman standard, with buildings and temples that could only be 3 or 4 stories shooting into the distance, causing the team to crane their necks to view. The branches of the great tree are carved with living spaces and dotted with yet more Deva
Hmm.
engaged in revelry. The carvings adorning every surface and building dance in time with the great song, coming from everywhere around them.
This sounds very much like the Children of the Night stuff from the Cactus verse with the Night King and them dancing and the drum beats and the prison of Titania, you know, with her heart in the tree to, you know, empower them, etc. This sounds very similar to that. It's giving me those kind of vibes. So I'm curious where more of this is going to go. It's interesting too that this is like literally a almost carbon copy version of the city in the physical realm, just in this astral form. And I like the description, you know, the walls made of stars and pulsating with the drum beats gives a really good sense of imagery of this astral city. this otherworldly place.
The crowd seems to move and thrum with a life of its own, and the communal dance pulses every entity in sight forward towards the citadel tree in the center of the city. Drawn along, the team is pulled forward, down the Broadway, and as they move through the great streets of the city, the grander it becomes. The plain gray stone of Mamjul has been painted over with bright, resplendent shades of reds, purples, and gold trimming, and the tall horned Deva's green skin makes a sharp contrast against the warm buildings they occupy. The raucous wildness only increases in intensity, with many of the entities openly engaged in intoxicated, violent combat.
Interesting.
In the distance, over the city's rooftops, gigantic beasts of burden, almost as tall as the trees, slowly move across the skyline on hundreds of legs.
Jesus.
The movements and lapping of the crowd.
This would be something that I would think of would be more of like Sarkic than the Davites, with these large creatures with hundreds of legs and bloodletting, I don't know if it's necessarily sacrificial, but bloodletting bouts and things like that. That feels kind of more Sarkic, or at least what I would think would be more Sarkic.
Gently push the group forward, but not aggressively. Many of the Deva are joyous at the sight of them, clasping their hands
honestly,
and raising them before letting them go. Eventually, they arrive at the entrance to the tunnel leading into the citadel, where the
I mean, it's potentially, right, again, thousands of years since they may have had any kind of connection with humanity in the physical realm. So this could be, again, as I said, a way for them to revive their civilization in the physical.
drumming and loudest singing can be heard coming from inside. They proceed in, passing by lines of Deva beating their fists against the stone wood walls in song. The group exits out into the throne room, containing 2 thrones, both carved from the same titanic vein of wood.
Interesting, too.
On the left sits a human corpse, with features made indiscernible by its age, dressed in
Another 40K
elaborate
reference.
finery and a wreath. The throne on the right is occupied by a female Deva in similarly elaborate dress, leading the song encompassing the entire city. The tree is open overhead, with the lightning and auroras visible through the canopy of leaves, and other robed Deva fill the various landings of the citadel. Blackwood remarks that this is not what he expected when they described Mamjul.
Yeah.
And Desai responds that this isn't Mamjul.
Kurar.
As they enter, the Deva sitting on the throne breaks off from the omnipresent song and slowly descends the staircase. The others continue unabated as she enters into a deep bow. She speaks in a language not heard by human ears in 3 millennia, but they understand her perfectly. She welcomes them to Kurar, eternal city of the Deva, seat of the slumbering Maharaja, the Scarlet City. Her name is Rajmata Vaslirasaraj Sharat, Empress consort of the Forlorn Covenant, and she welcomes them back. One thing's for certain, the team is definitely going to learn far more about the Davites.
They're not in Kansas anymore
than they did from Mamjul.
They are not in Kansas anymore,
Being
brother.
able to speak with an actual Deva is a pretty uncommon thing.
No kidding.
And we're going to learn a lot about the history of the Deva and the 2 cities. Everything seems fairly pleasant on the surface here, with a lot of song and dance.
That's gonna, I'm sure, change.
These were not a peace-loving people.
Yeah.
And they worship a god of blood and death. We'll just have to see if Galanis and the team can find out some info about the Davites that does some good, without having a repeat of the Amani Ram debacle, or worse.
Indeed. Indeed. All right. No quote. Yeah. Well, there you have it. that was part 2 of Mamjul Korar SCP-001 by the Exploring series. Links down below, as always, in the description to the playlist here that he has for Red Tape and to his channel. So please do me a favor, if you enjoyed this video of his, go give it a like and be sure to hit that sub button on the channel if you haven't already, and give the man some love. I mean, this episode was pretty much kind of a straightforward episode. It's basically like a setup episode for what's to come. You know, Galantis and the SCP Foundation team aren't having any luck finding anything out about the city and the Davites. They ask for the help of Blackwood. He shows them how to astral project, and they find the eternal city of the Davites, Kurar. And, you know, it ends right there with them being introduced to the Empress. I mean, again, I feel like they're being welcomed so far because this has been however many thousands of years. I mean, who knows also in this astral state how relative time is, if it really matters. Maybe it's only been moments, maybe it's been eternities for them. You know, who knows? And who knows if it really matters to them. But I feel like it's a situation where they're welcoming them because, you know, humans provide an access to the physical realm again, and a potential rebirth of their civilization, you know, down here on Earth and humanity. So that's kind of where I feel like this is gonna go. But I guess we'll find out. I mean, the description of the astral city was like I said, it definitely evoked a lot of imagery. The stars, the walls kind of made of stars, and the pulsating of the stars with the music and the massive trees and the creatures. Like, from what they described, I would have thought this would be more Sarkic, but if this is what Davites are like, I wonder what the Sarkics are going to be like. And then, of course, again, I think so far out of this series, my biggest question is still, what is the Abomination? Or what, who, etc. So hopefully we'll find that out as we go on in the future. But that's gonna do it for this one, guys. Like I said, links down below for all the stuff. If you'd like to join us as I do this reaction live with my YouTube members, there's a join button underneath the video, as well as a link in the description to the YouTube membership tiers and benefits that I offer. So if you've been around the channel for a while and decide you want to take your sport to the next level, take a look at that stuff and see if it would have any interest for you. Regardless, thank you for taking the time to watch the video. If you're still here at the very end, greatly appreciate you taking the time in your busy day to hang out and watch the video. Hope you enjoyed it. If you did, consider leaving a like and a sub, as it helps me and the channel grow, and it lets me and the YouTube algorithm know you guys like this kind of content and you want to see some more. As I stated before, you know, as I do these videos, I'm going to release them individually, but eventually at the end, I will combine them together into one super long video, etc. So however you prefer to watch it, if you want to watch them individually, if you want to wait until you know, I get them all out at once, up to you guys. But that's gonna do it for this one. Thank you guys for watching. Hope you have a wonderful day, and we'll see you on the next one.